I'd like to thank Nagesh for that keynote speech, making a strong pitch for regional economic integration in South Asia, outlining the possibilities and opportunities. He's covered a wide range of subjects, and I hope a very distinguished panel will respond to the points which Nagesh has made. I'm going to invite Akmal to open the batting on behalf of the panelists. And as a veteran in the field of regional economic cooperation, perhaps he can share with us his vision, bearing in mind that we now have a new government in Pakistan. Mr. Nawaz Sharif has made a strong pitch, both in terms of improving relations with India as well as in support of regional cooperation. We'd be interested to hear your take on this. Perhaps you could also say a word or two about trade and services and your favorite subject, health and education. But before you speak, I'm going to ask the lady with the green and red flag to place herself nearby because we are giving 7 minutes to each of our panelists and your help will be much needed. So over to you, Akmal. I think you can speak from there. Yes, it saves, we are all equipped with microphones. So.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my dear friends from across the region.
You sit, relax.
Sit down.
Yes, sit down, please.
Davos style.
As you wish. Davos style.
Davos style. South Asia is at a historic conjuncture in that for the first time in 3 centuries, the center of gravity of the global economy is shifting from the West to this part of the world. If India can recover its growth trend and Pakistan can reach its potential of 7 to 8% GDP growth, and the other South Asian countries are able to maintain their high growth trajectories, then it is estimated that by the middle of this century, South Asia will become the 2nd largest economy in the world after China. And so together with China, this South Asia will be part of the greatest, most powerful economic center known in human history. Now this great opportunity is coming where there's some very interesting trends that are in operation. I'll very quickly point to those. Given the 7 minutes, all I'll do is to indicate some new concepts that are need to emerge on the basis of new data that's being generated. The first interesting thing is that both India and China began 2 decades ago with their high growth trajectory. And within these 2 decades, both countries have doubled their per capita incomes. Now, in terms of speed and scale, they have 1 billion people each. In terms of speed and scale, this has had a far greater impact than the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century. So you can imagine the potential dynamism that exists in this region, provided we get our act together. And to get our act together, I'll very quickly speak on 2 concepts, I think, which are evolving amongst South Asian scholars, and indeed, judging from Minister Ahsan Iqbal's speech this morning, the governments are also beginning to respond to these new ideas. The first is that we not only need high sustained rates of growth, but we also need to restructure the growth process so that its capacity to reduce poverty is enhanced. We need growth that is inclusive. That's the first, I think, idea that I'll very quickly point to. And the second is that this growth process needs to take account of the fact that the region is facing a critical threat to its future, in terms of the impact of climate change. The variability of the monsoons, the rising seawater levels, the reduced river flows have combined to create a major threat to the economic prospects of this region. And so, therefore, growth has to take account of both the issue of equality, what Professor Rehman Subhan has called the injustice of poverty, and also the issue of the environment. And finally, I'll end with a new view, if you like, on this whole issue of provisioning of basic services, such as education, health, and social protection. For, I think, the last half century, the received wisdom is that these countries are too poor to go for a universal provisioning of basic services. And so we need to have a targeted approach where we target certain basic services at best to the poorer sections of society. I think this view will need to be overturned in view of the new evidence that's come up. Okay, starting with the issue of growth sustainability. The first concept I think we need to consider is that while in the history of capitalism and the mainstream economics, it was thought that growth inevitably is accompanied by inequality. So in a sense, inequality is an unfortunate symptom of something that's positive, which is high growth. Actually, we've now, after looking at some of the data, my argument is that indeed equity is not just an end in itself in terms of social justice. Equity can be a powerful mechanism for sustaining and generating high rates of growth. And the reason simply is, quite apart from the other issues, the reason simply is that if you open up your institutional structures to the middle classes and the poor and give them access over productive assets and high quality training and education, then you have a much broader base of competition, of efficiency increase, of innovation, of productivity growth. So in other words, a more equitable institutional structure and a more equitable economic growth process will also be a faster and a more sustained GDP growth process. The second issue of incorporating the threat to the environment. I don't need to tell this distinguished audience that in the Pakistani case, in the Indus Basin waters, the per capita per year availability of water is now down to about 1,300 cubic meters per person per year, whereas the recognized minimum water requirement is 1,700 cubic meters per person per year. So therefore, we have a major water crisis. The Ganges-Brahmaputra basin is water surplus right now. Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna basin is a surplus. But by 2050, they will also get into a major water scarcity situation. They'll be down to about 1,000 cubic meters per person per year. So this, combined with the problem of the variability of the monsoons and the heat effect on seeds, which is expected to lead to a 30% decline in the yields per acre of food grains, I think we're facing a major prospect of a major food crisis, food security crisis. And for that, there is no other option. If we are to survive, economic integration becomes vital. Economic integration, therefore, is not only a question of building a better future, a more prosperous future, it's a question of survival itself. And then, I think underpinning a growth process that is inclusive has to be a new role for the governments of the region. And that is the universal provisioning of basic services. If now UNDP has generated new data to show that the major countries which have achieved takeoff, ranging from Norway to Sweden, Germany, China, Japan, even Costa Rica, undertook the universal provisioning of basic services like education, health, and social protection at a time in their history when their per capita incomes at that time were lower than the per capita incomes of India and Pakistan today. Germany in the 18th century Sweden and Norway in the mid-19th century, China in the mid-20th century, Japan in the mid-19th century. Each one of these countries went into universal provisioning of basic services as a first step, if you like, for economic takeoff. Now, the idea that poor countries like South Asian countries are unable to afford this kind of thing, again, I think is essentially flawed, simply because of the fact that the examples of these countries shows that when a country makes a commitment, a long-term commitment to the universal provisioning of basic services, it creates the legitimacy to have a taxation, a broad taxation base to finance this, finance the process of providing services to people. And in the end, I would say that the provisioning of basic services is also critical to maintaining the social cohesion of society and indeed the survival of states. Now, the new work that has been done by Roderick and subsequently by Easterly shows that societies which are more cohesive generate higher and longer term growth than societies which are less cohesive. So the provisioning of health, education, and social protection on a universal basis, I think will not only create a more equitable society, it will not only lay the basis of long-term growth, but it will also create greater social cohesion in society and will strengthen the democratic structures of these states. With those words, I thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Akmal. I think from your sweeping remarks, we can conclude that certainly your heart is in the right place in terms of reaching out to India, and we hope that you indeed reflect the views of Pakistan today on these key issues. Will the lady with the flags please come closer to us? I now hand over to Mr. Connectivity, and I will request Dr. Ramatullah to perhaps pick up some of the points mentioned by Nagesh in his keynote speech, focusing on corridors, on the whole issue of multimodal transport. What do we need to do to make these things happen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine. Go ahead.
I would like to fully agree with Dr. Nagesh Kumar when he mentioned that for real development of this South Asia, we need to have very efficient connectivity from the east to the west, north to the south. But the question is that when we talk about connectivity, we normally feel that it is the international routes which we are talking about connectivity. But for inclusive and sustainable development, we need to make sure that the rural areas, hinterland areas are also connected properly. And for this to happen, and this is very important because even for which we need to develop the surface transport or land transport. Land transport is particularly important for the landlocked countries as well. And for that sort of infrastructure, we need 3 levels of development. One is for international connectivity, which Dr. Nagesh Kumar has rightly pointed out. I'll show you what the weaknesses are still remaining, which need to be addressed. Another is the middle level, which is the connectivity within the country, within each country, between the port and hinterland, and between the ICDs or dry ports and other major cities and development centers. This is another level of development of infrastructure to connect the major centers of the country. Third level is the rural areas infrastructure development to connect the areas which are not yet included and which are deprived to bring them into mainstream of development. So connectivity means not only international connectivity, but also connectivity within the country, connectivity to involve the rural areas. Now, in the context of international connectivity, which Dr. Nagesh Kumar has rightly pointed out, that we are trying to develop two major corridors, one rail-based corridor as well as road-based corridor. Now, Asian Highway and Transocean Railway was conceived by ASCAP member countries, and ASCAP Secretariat has been pursuing this, and we have been able to develop the network connectivity. That means network has been connected now. Member countries have signed an agreement. Out of 32 countries of Asian Highway, 29 countries have already signed. And in the case of railway, 26 out of 26 countries, 22 countries have already signed. So signing is only that agreeing to the network. But its next stage is the facilitation, that nothing can move unless the instruments are there to move. And where are these instruments? ASCAP has been already working on it for quite some time, and they have been able to develop a regional strategic framework for facilitation of international road transport. This is a very good instrument, and member countries need to become a party to this agreement. Then the facilitation measure will be easy to put in place. Then the next question will be that facilitation measures, once the member countries become party, is not the end of it. Member countries shall have to be now active to make it operational. This is the third stage, and where the initiatives are very much lacking. ASCAP has been instrumental in the development of Asian Highway, Transocean Railway, and the facilitation measures is again ASCAP's product. So ASCAP need to take a renewed interest now to activate the countries, bring in the political mindset change, and bring them closer so that operationalization can take place. As you know, that rail connectivities are there between Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, but no train moves. Connectivity is there, the road connectivity is from one end to the another end is there, but nothing moves. So that is the place where the emphasis is required to be placed now by the countries to make it really operational, to bring in real success of connectivity and bring the benefit to the countries, member countries. Now coming to, in this context, Bangladesh has already taken a very pioneering effort. As you know that there was a joint communique signed by Bangladesh and India in 2010, where they have opened, Bangladesh has opened its ports, its land routes in rail and road to all the neighboring countries, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan. But again there, not much has happened in reality. So we need to pursue that. Bangladesh has taken a pioneering effort, and we need to pursue similar efforts should be on the west side of South Asia, that is Pakistan, India, Afghanistan. That part also need to do similar things, that open up their facilities, road, rail, connectivities to the neighboring countries. As regards the multimodal transport operation, the ladies, yes, multimodal transport operation, we need to make sure that the member countries become a party to the multimodal transport operation. There are agreements required, instruments must be in place. Again, infrastructure must be in good position, and facilitation measures must be there. And again, political mindset shall have to be changed to allow their ports and infrastructure to be used. So again, the same question, that political mindset shall have to be changed, and ASCAP need to take initiative to open up that issue, and then bring in the countries together to give the real benefit to the member countries. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Ramatullah. I think he's given us certainly a clear idea of what more needs to be done. I think connectivity clearly is of vital importance in terms of trade and investment and the entire integration agenda. I'm now going to invite our next panelist, Dr. Pokhrel, Dr. Jagadish Pokhrel, and I'm going to request you, Dr. Pokhrel, if you could perhaps focus on the energy sector, particularly this whole idea of an energy market, energy trade, a South Asian energy grid? And why have we not been able to harness Nepal's, some say, 80,000 megawatts of hydropower potential?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It's a very wide open question, but you have, I think, framed it very nicely. The question that you shared with us, what keeps Nepal from exploiting its hydro potential like Bhutan? That was the one question. I would say, can it do it? I say yes. Why I am so optimistic that it can be done? Let me put you in some perspective. I go back about 20 years to the 1990s when we first started inviting private sector in hydropower development under a framework, a legal framework that opened opportunities for them. So we consider that 1990 period and almost beginning of first few years of millennium as a normal period. Then we entered a period which was basically a conflict, very much armed conflict, and not only hydropower, many of our development initiatives could not be sort of implemented. So the country for about a decade was very much in a difficult situation. That period is now over, and we consider a new period beginning after the comprehensive peace agreement that we use in Nepal as a terminology, as a landmark. From that point onwards, it is
Yes,
a
we're going to
transition.
give you, can we have,
Now I can.
No, it's better now.
It's a transition. Of course, the transition has taken
It's not working.
transition has taken longer than what we thought it would take.
yeah. Please use the mic.
The transition is for normal, peaceful political sort of outcome of this negotiated settlement between the rebel forces and other political forces, including the state. This period we consider a post-conflict transition period. And this, we are very much engaged in writing a new constitution, new contract. Hopefully that will give us outlet to the political sort of stalemate that we are going through at the moment. An election is scheduled, which will write the Constitution Assembly, that will write the Constitution, and the state will be restructured. So at the moment, what we are doing is actually doing homework for the post-restructured state to move ahead. What has been realized is that Nepal cannot remain as it is, below 4% growth per annum, between two large countries, China and India, which are growing almost, say, more than 7% per year. Some of the terminologies that we are using is that we will be overwhelmed if we don't develop fast. So that realization is there, and this is the period we are working. We have an experience from 1990 to the first, say, decade until 2000, that 6.56% growth is possible. So that is that gives us sort of hope, and we are learning from our own experience what made it possible and what needs to be done. The other approach that we are taking is some of the large-scale projects that required mobilization of large investment. A new board for investment has been created. This is a new institution which is mandated to mobilize resources, private sector, resources nationally and internationally to implement projects which are larger than 500 megawatt capacity. Below 500 megawatt, we do through different mechanism, but this board is mobilizing research. Currently, it's about 2.5 years that board is in place, and it has a portfolio of about $12 billion project. 10 of them are hydropower, 500 megawatt and above. Very soon, it's going to make some kind of breakthrough as example, and we are hoping that eventually the kind of model that we are talking about, like Bhutan, if not exactly like Bhutan, but again, private sector mobilization investment, some kind of participatory approach will be taken under our law, which is called BOOT, to implement these large-scale projects. So I am very optimistic that very soon we'll be able sort of to make breakthrough in terms of executing large-scale projects. Now the second question was, would it be possible sort of to think about regional energy market through some kind of integration? It is possible. Already Nepal and India, they are constructing at 3 points transmission lines to connect with the national grid. It is possible that that grid is expanded to the regional level, and wherever there is surplus, whenever is a surplus, the energy is exchanged within the regional members. The characteristics of our hydropower sector is such that in rainy season we have a lot of water and more energy, and there is a lean season when we don't have one. So here is an opportunity opening for regional country to sort of share the surpluses and also come up with some kind of energy mix within the region to meet the gap. For example, the natural gas of Bangladesh and the hydropower in Nepal and some other sources of energy in other member countries could be sort of exchanged within some kind of with some kind of formula of a mix. I think that is a very much possible thing that can be done. And finally, I would say we in Nepal say we are heading for a renaissance. It will be a Nepali renaissance, and it will reflect in social, economic, and political areas. And we should also be thinking in terms of South Asian renaissance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pokhrel. We certainly fully endorse your concept, not only of a renaissance for Nepal, but for South Asia. And certainly energy should form a very important component in this process. We know, for example, that energy trade now is high on the India-Pakistan agenda. It's high on the India-Bangladesh agenda. We are, in fact, our grid connectivity with India should become operational by the end of this month. So, and then we are looking at importing energy both from the Indian Northeast as well as from West Bengal, and looking forward to connectivity with both Nepal and Bhutan. So I think all kinds of opportunities are now opening up in the energy sector. I'm now going to invite Dr. Sham Bathija, advisor to President Karzai. As we all know, Afghanistan is the latest member, the new entry into SAARC. I think it's a fair question to ask him, and how does Afghanistan feel about being a member of SAARC? What have you got out of SAARC? We speak about special and differential treatment for LDCs, and of course, as a landlocked country, connectivity, particularly through Pakistan to India and the rest of the region. These would be obvious questions, which I'm sure we would welcome your thoughts on this. Over to you, Sham.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, most of you know what Afghanistan has gone through since the past 30 years, and we are coming out of much happened in the country in terms of conflicts, sort of, localization and all kinds of things and so on. We actually attach very importance to the regional cooperation. It is within this context that basically we have joined almost all the regional and sub-regional organizations, including ECO, for example, Shanghai, SARC, and many other such organizations. It is both for our own interest and necessity, because Afghanistan traditionally has been, as you know, like a crossroad of civilization, crossroads of Silk Road initiatives, and so on. And we continue to be in the same sort of thinking. We are building up, for example, and facilitating trade, transit, transport, customs, and investment facilitations. We like to see, for example, our regional involvement, particularly economic integrations, to really expand even further to the SAARC countries as well as our neighboring ECO countries, for example. Because Afghanistan, as you know, we are blessed with an enormous amount of natural resources, including oil, gas, whatnot. And we certainly like to see this. We cannot explode ourselves in Afghanistan. We don't have that capacity, and we don't have the manpower and human resources. So it's about time that the region should get involved, region or the regions basically, to really be part of it and so on. So within that context, being us as a landlocked country, as the least developed country still, hopefully on our way to our economic integration, I think we look forward to the SAARC fully involvement in that part. How far we have benefited from SAARC? Naturally, we are newcomers to the SAARC itself, other than just participation, major activities and so on. But we are benefiting a lot from the Delhi office of the ESCOP. That they are doing enormous amount of work for us, which is basically also in a way contribution to the SAARC region for us as well. Afghanistan is basically not very well connected, say, by air, for example. When you see it, we certainly like to see we should be connected more. And on the connection part, as you rightly pointed out, that this is more important, I go connectivity in many, many other areas. You talk about investment, you talk about energy, you talk about trade, you talk about all kinds of facilities which we are doing it. For example, we have just signed with our brother Pakistan nation the AFPAC agreement, for example. Within that context, hopefully that will connect Afghanistan, Pakistan, even further all the way to India. As a matter of fact, I was reading a book which was given to me by one of my Pakistani friends, a truck road from Kabul to Calcutta, for example. You might have as well seen it in the early days. So let's make that dream come true as well. We have not benefited per se much from the preferential trade sort of benefits. Because, first of all, our export base and things are a little bit limited and so on. But whatever we have, our products and exports going on, particularly to India and Pakistan, we have been basically benefiting quite a bit from that. Within the LDC context, naturally, Afghanistan has played a role being an LDC country within the global fora and so on. But we certainly like to develop more. As I said, for connectivity, now it has to go a little beyond that. Manufacturing connectivity. For example, Afghanistan is a 30 million population. Will certainly call for manufacturing hubs, for example, coming from the region, basically. And that will help us more to reach out to basically and benefit for us as well. But Afghanistan basically now is, because we're going to go through, hopefully, next year of transition period, both we have elections after like 12 years of interim government and elected government. Second, now the president will hand over, hopefully, to the next elections and so on. And plus, I think that will bring more opportunities for our own South Asia, basically, I would say, as well as the ECO countries, to participate more actively within the country's economies and so on. We certainly like to invite them because, as I mentioned earlier, some people say we are sitting on $1 trillion, others say you're sitting on a $3 trillion resources, but whatever, there's a resources available, and these resources has to be sort of manufactured, exploited, and then joint ventured, as well as further developed to the benefits of not only for Afghanistan, but the benefits should go to the region as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we certainly hope, especially looking to 2014, that we have a smooth transition. And I certainly think that the more successful we are in integrating Afghanistan with the rest of South Asia, the better it will be, not simply for Afghanistan, but for the region as a whole, given the enormous resources. There's also talk about the Tapi pipeline, as well as enormous mineral potentials of Afghanistan. So there is certainly a cause for optimism, but of course there are challenges that need to be addressed. Our last speaker on the panel is Dr. Sanjay Kathuria, who until quite recently had an extended spell in Bangladesh. He knows the region well. He is now being asked to focus on regional economic integration. And perhaps he can share with us the bank's thinking on why have we not been able to make more progress. What about foreign direct investment? What about non-tariff barriers? And I would in fact like to throw in an additional question, which I'm sure is on the minds of all of us. What is happening in India in terms of the challenges that India is facing today, and how is that going to impact on the whole regional economic cooperation agenda? Over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you very much, Farooq Bhai. So first of all, I'd like to the premise that there is that there is low level of intra-regional trade. We always start with that premise, and is that premise true? So currently we talk about 3 to 5% of trade is intra-regional. Now we all know that there is a lot of informal trade. India, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and so does that make a difference? Well, I would submit that even if you double that ratio, let's say from 3 to 5% of trade to 7 to 8 to 9% of trade, it's still very low. So I think I would accept that proposition that yes, we do have a region with very low levels of actual intra-regional trade. Well, then the question is that it's often said that South Asia is a region with high overall trade barriers, and therefore that's a problem when it comes to trade, right? Because you do have barriers. However, that should affect overall trade ratios, overall trade to GDP, certainly should not affect, because both your denominator and your numerator are affected. So it should not affect the share of intra-South Asian trade. So is there something else there? Is it that South Asia is producing products that are of great interest to each other, or there is low levels of complementarity? Now, I want to focus specifically on the issue of garments and textiles, which, in many countries in the region is a primary source of exports. 80% of Bangladesh's merchandise exports, very large share of Pakistan's exports, and Sri Lanka. So, and this we know is also an area where generally restrictions on trade are much higher. And therefore, given that there's a focus on textiles, therefore there's a question of, is the product focus, a problem for South Asia? So is there an issue of complementarity of products? Well, so on the face of it, yes. But actually, I'm not a great believer in this, as you might come to expect, because one thing is that we know about intra-industry trade. There's a lot of intra-industry trade that is possible, that is not happening. Some of it is happening. I mean, there is the same products. Saris are exchanged on both sides of the India-Bangladesh border. Salwars and suits are exchanged in India and Pakistan and saris. So, I mean, that's just an example. Lots of potential for intra-industry trade. And in the same vein, specialization. lot of potential for specialization, yarn, cloth, garments, just one value chain, for example. Some of it is happening. And finally, I think the most important point is that India, notwithstanding recent events, is on a long-term trend towards high growth. It's a very dynamic economy, rapidly becoming more and more sophisticated. So the ask of India, India's ask from its neighbors in terms of the kinds of product is evolving very, very rapidly. So I think, and given that it dominates the region, 80% of the overall economy of South Asia, I believe very strongly that these complementarity exercises are basically very static. And essentially that's what they are, static. They do not look at the picture, at the longer term picture that is possible, afforded through dynamic growth of the central economy. Then the next issue is, so I'm talking about all why there is low amount of trade within. So high cost of trade, I think Dr. Ramatullah, Nagesh have talked about it, so I won't go into that. I would just say that South Asia has managed to convert distances of tens and hundreds of miles into thousands of miles. It's been a brilliant feat in South Asia. They've just managed to do that. The next reason is that the two biggest economies in the region, India and Pakistan, are obviously have a trust deficit amongst them. And if there is a trust deficit, there is low trade. The Wagah border, which is the natural port for exchange of goods, only 137 products are allowed to be traded through the Wagah border, and that, of course, limits the extent of trade. And then the other trade, which is done to bypass that, is more expensive and limits, therefore, competitiveness, and therefore there is a trade diversion and limits intra-South Asian trade. But for me, the biggest reason amongst all of what I've cited for low intra-South Asian trade is basically investment. I mean, I believe that trade does follow investment. There is a lack of a dynamic relationship between the countries. There is very low South Asian FDI. And if investment really starts occurring to exploit regional comparative advantage, as opposed to just based on static comparisons, I think a lot is possible. Then it's not business not fettered by boundaries, but planning, investment, scope, and location. I'll spend a quick minute on the issue of FDI, why there is not enough FDI happening, especially from India to other countries. Well, FDI, obviously, the source countries are in the driver's seat. So the host countries, that is the other economies of South Asia, for example, if they wanted to attract investment from India, they would need to do just that, i.e. be proactive in trying to attract investment from India. We know that this means that local issues need to be sorted out. There are fears of local industry from getting swamped. And secondly, there is also a political issue of a negative political issue versus India when it comes to the economies in the region. Both of these will need to get sorted out. The issue is that India is a large country. There are many second-tier, third-tier cities coming up. So I think it's important from an economic point of view also for countries to position themselves vis-a-vis, the Bengals and the Punjabs and the Bihars when it comes to positioning, because Indian investment is also going a lot into second-tier and third-tier cities. And so I think it will be important to do that. And I think the importance of countries to try and attract anchor investors from India, like the TCSs or the Airtels of the world, will be very important in having then other companies following suit. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to address? I have run out of time. Would you like me to say?
I'll give you 30 seconds.
Okay. So how will what's happening in India affect regional integration? I think there are many more people in the room who are better qualified than I to speak about that. But my own 2 cents on that is that I think India does, from whatever we've had a lot of discussions with Indian policymakers, and we do believe that they do have a very strong commitment. And India has realized that essentially that if it is to become the power that it aspires to be in the world, then it will have to take the region along with it. And therefore, irrespective of which governments come to power and irrespective of economic mishaps or stumbles along the way, the push towards regional economic cooperation will continue, indeed may even get accentuated given the economic concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, friends, we've had a very thought-provoking presentation from Dr. Nagesh Kumar. I think he's made a very strong pitch in support of regional economic integration. But he has outlined also some of the challenges that need to be addressed. And I have to thank the panelists because they have also both addressed the issue of challenges as well as opportunities. I hope, in a sense, that gives us food for thought as well as will feed into the sessions that will follow today and over the next 2 days. Let me conclude by saying that I think the rationale in support of regional economic integration is there for us all to see. It's, in a sense, overwhelming, it's self-evident, but at the same time we know that a lot needs to be done. I think clearly, on the one hand, we need to see the private sector play an important role. We need to see the governments also step up their role as facilitators. And then we need to see better coordination between the multilaterals. We have the World Bank, we have the UN, we have a number of other key institutions who have an important role to play. And it's really getting them all together and making things happen. Yes, we are all also have to address the politics of the region. But I would say that my hope has always been that we have now reached a point where economics will trump politics, and we can look forward to inclusive growth for the region as a whole. So thank you, everyone, for your presence and your patient hearing.
Thank you.